Hello to all my Xenoblade chroniclers out there. It is me, Tyrea Wife Guy, back again with another burbtastic video. We're doing something a little bit different this month, and by that I mean I'm going to try and upload 4 videos during it, one on each of the first 4 Fridays. There's a good chance I'm going to do this. Every video after this one is going to go under the new category of Patreon subscribers and YouTube members, getting them at least a week early before they go out publicly. And there's only one potential issue with this, that being the 4th of the videos, which will be coming out on the 24th of May, simply because I will be at MomoCon that weekend, and I don't know if I will have the time or opportunity to make a video public and ensure everything goes smoothly with that, so that might be delayed until the Tuesday, but the video will still be done long before then. Also, if you are at said MomoCon, you will have a chance to meet me and a bunch of other Xenoblade creators who will be there. Anyway, moving on to the main topic of this video. This is part 2 of the 3-parter about the Xenoblade 3 Ionios Moments art book. The first part was about the initial stuff from the big lore interview. This second part will be updates to that and just kind of more general cleanup. And the third part will be about the new pieces of art itself. This video is going to be relatively shorter, and half of it is going to be a new Xenosaga connection theory, actually. And the third one is going to be longer, but not necessarily as long as the 90-minute video that I made about the Special Edition Xenoblade 3 art book, simply because a lot of art in Ionios Moments is reprinted from there, and a lot of the interesting content in the new book is actually in commentary that is currently only in Japanese, so I'm going to want to wait for a full fan translation of the book before making an entire comprehensive video about all the stuff in here that we don't yet know. That being said, this is a post-future redeemed Xenoblade 3 discussion type thing, so while the Xenosaga stuff will have a second spoiler warning when we get there, this video will contain spoilers for the entire numbered Xenoblade Chronicles trilogy. Before we really get started though, 2 small pieces of good news. The first is that the Xenosaga album Kickstarter has ended and was a massive success. When I last discussed it, it had already been fully funded, but was 2 stretch goals away from everything being done, and those were both blown past by the time the campaign ended. So not only will the album also include a handful of new jazz arrangements, it will be recorded in higher quality, and there will eventually be a physical concert in France at some point in the future. So that's all great. I'm glad this got off the ground. Xenosaga is good, and I hope more people will get to play it soon. Secondly, the Xenoblade 3 art book, which the rest of this video is about, has already been announced to have a second print run. It apparently has sold extremely well. I don't know the details on the Xenoblade 2 one and when that got its additional printings and stuff like that. But considering this happened within like a week of it coming out, I'd say that's a pretty good sign. It's everywhere in Japan. I've seen pictures of it stacked on multiple different shelves right next to gacha game art books from franchises that definitely bring in more money than Xenoblade, and is surprisingly cheap for its page count to get shipped elsewhere in the world. That being said, this is just a second printing of the existing Japanese version of the book, which means whenever this comes out, it will still be only officially available in one of the 8 languages, counting Chinese only once, that the actual Xenoblade 3 game was available in on its release date 2 years ago, so it's not great, especially because even the ebook can't be bought from certain regions. So really, if they're gonna translate the game into a lot of languages, they should probably also translate the art book that has important lore information not available anywhere else into at least some of those languages. It's a haha funny when we're talking about the games with other fans that yes, every single entry in the series has some very important information locked behind the Japanese language, but that should not be the case anymore in current year. It is not acceptable. Either put it all in the game or translate every piece of important supplemental material. Next up, a few things that should actually be changed in the second printing of the book, because in the one that exists now, they are incorrect. First off, the header pages for most of the chapters have some of the in-game chibis on them, and Gray's is wrong. In his chibi and character model in the actual game, Gray's eye patch is on his right eye, and this is consistent. However, a while ago, I believe it was in the update Ino was added, his chibi was mistakenly swapped to one where his left eye was covered. This was reverted back in the actual game, but the wrong version is what's used on the world design chapter header page in the art book. This is especially unfortunate because this is the highest resolution any of these chibis are officially available in. The ebook pages are higher res than both the sprites in the original game, and I believe the NSO profile pictures, so yeah, the accurate grade chibi is just not officially available in the same resolution as all the other ones. Additionally, on a later chapter page, Monika's chibi shows up, and that uses the eye patch version instead of the no eye patch version, which is probably the one you'll have for more of the game, so that's also kind of weird. I kind of understand how this happened because Gray's concept art is also in the book, and most of it does show the eye patch on his left eye. Like, there had to be a reason there existed a chibi of him with the eye patch on the other eye in the game's files in the first place, and this is why. So, yeah, I get why they took that one by mistake, but also, the finished version of his art is in the book as well. It is the only piece of art on the page it appears on, so I'm not sure what happened here. This is the kind of thing that definitely should have been caught in editing, but just wasn't for some reason. And that is also the case for the second major error. If you pay attention to Future Redeemed, it is very obvious that Glimmer and Nikal are both in their 9th term. Both of their term markers are clearly shown and are identical to Mio's from the base game, and part of Glimmer's initial motivation even revolves around the fact that she was very close to homecoming before she was freed from the cycle. Why then are both of their ages listed as 18 instead of 19 in the art book? To exacerbate this, for characters who are soldiers, the age line on their bio actually reads number kanji for years old, and then in parentheses, another number with the kanji for the term that's translated as term in English. So, yep, Glimmer and Nikal are listed as 18 years old and in their 9th term, despite neither of those being the case. This is once again an instance of something being chosen just by looking at the concept art, and whoever edited this section must not have actually played the video game, because, yep, both Glimmer and Nikal do use the 9th term marker in their concept art for whatever reason, but again, play the game and you can very clearly tell they're supposed to be 10th termers. Like, another one of the chapter header pages uses all of the term markers instead of some of the chibis, so enough information to not get this wrong is present just by reading the book itself and then watching part of the ending of Future Redeemed. And to make things worse, the art book doesn't even have every canon age from the game. Despite what happens to them in the story, Shania and Garnica both appear on the affinity chart and both have canon ages. And yet, both of their ages are completely absent from their character bios for zero reason whatsoever. Shania, you do actually have to look in the affinity chart to find, but Garnica directly states his age in Chapter 1, so I really don't know how any of this slipped through. Those mistakes have me annoyed at Katakawa, the company who actually put the art book together, because I'm able to notice something is wrong with the Nikal and Glimmer pages without really being able to read any Japanese besides some katakana, and this book apparently had editors who are supposed to catch things like that, but there's also one age-related thing that has me annoyed at Monolith Soft. Every main character from Future Redeemed, besides those two, whose ages are wrong, remember, has their age listed as question mark. For most of them, this makes sense. A is very obvious. It would be unnecessary detail, really, to have an exact timeline down to the year of when the processors were made, then when Klaus's experiment took place, then exactly how many years in Pocket Dimension and out of Pocket Dimension the Xenoblade 1 world lasted for. So, yeah, I get it. That is more a hassle for Monolith to actually keep track of than it would be to just hand-wave that part. Ontos, especially out of the Trinity, is just never going to have an exact age, because that's the one that had the same consciousness effectively going on for the entire time. It's not worth it to have an actual age for that. Riku shows up in the main game section as well, and his age is question mark. Every Noppon's age is question mark. That's fine. Shulk and Rex, I would have liked to know how old they were, because that would nail down exactly how long it's been in between the ending of Xenoblade 1 and 2 and when Ionios happened. But it seems like they want to keep their cards a bit closer to their chest when it comes to stuff like that, just because this continuity is going to be picked up soon, and it seems like they're tying the exact ending of Ionios into future events and aren't going to time skip past that. So I understand why they might either want to hold that back for a reveal or some tidbits in a later game, or just haven't nailed down the timeline exactly, so they don't want to completely show their hand before they're entirely sure what the next project's going to be. The things that do annoy me, though, are Matthew and Niall. There was no reason for Monolith to not even make up ages for those two and then give them to Katakawa to publish in the art book, because there is no reason why we shouldn't know their ages, really. All we know is that they are probably both in their 20s, because Matthew is a couple years older than Niall, and it seems like they were both too old to have been soldiers in the Flame Clock system. But beyond that, we are not going to see these versions of the characters anymore. Every Flame Clock soldier and every member of the city is going to be reincarnated in some way when they get reborn in the old world. All of the soldiers already have incarnations in the old world that are completely different from any of their Flame Clock versions, and those are going to take precedent. They'll probably have lingering memories from the other lives, but they're going to be back in their original body, or recreation of their original body. Shut up, I don't care about semantics like that. We don't need to ship of Theseus Noah. And that's just a different version of the character. While people like Shulk, Rex, and Riku are just going back to their original bodies because their original bodies were the ones in Ionios. It makes sense for the characters who are going to exist outside Ionios exactly how they did within it to have their ages obfuscated for the case of not wanting to deal with the timeline quite yet. But just like the soldiers, the citizens are going to be in different incarnations when they're born into the new world. They might not even look the same. All the soldiers are still going to be genetically identical because they were cloned off of the people from the original world. But it is very possible that the souls of the people of the city will be incarnated into brand new bodies. So this is the last time we're going to see these versions of Matthew and Niall. Even if they have the exact same bodies, if and when we see them again, they're still going to be different incarnations of the characters. So it would have been nice to just give some sort of time frame for any of this, because that would help us figure out when the second city was founded, when the first city was destroyed, and all that stuff. But I don't know. I would have liked to have more information in this book, but I guess we can't have nice things all the time. Moving on to our next segment, it is blue text time, as the translations provided by Lugal Banda at the Xenomira WordPress blog that I used in the last video were outdated by the time that video publicly released, as he added a few addendums to clarify other points or translate a few things that people wanted to know about. And, well, I'm going to cover them now a month later, just because I didn't do it before. The first thing is that A is referred to as a woman in the bio section of A's concept art. And this is not just like a wacky fan translation getting something wrong or that kind of thing. Multiple translators have confirmed this. I looked up the exact kanji used in that sentence, and that is what is stated there. Okay. We already knew A was a more feminine presenting version of Ontos. This doesn't really change anything. Does not eliminate the existence of the Rex conversation or how A is referred to without using pronouns in the English version, or being addressed in gender-neutral ways in the original Japanese and using a masculine personal pronoun, the same one Alvis used even. So, yeah, this doesn't really change anything. It shouldn't change how you refer to A and talk about A in any other context. So it's just a thing that is there now. The one thing about this sentence that I will always be salty about, though, is how it had the potential to be so much better. Based on machine translation, the sentence just says something like, A is a woman who wields a sword called the Monado, or something along those lines. Basically, it says A is a woman, then also A has a Monado. The initial, very inaccurate machine translation of this I read said, A is a woman whose sex is Monado, which goes infinitely harder than any official description of A or the gender identities of any of the Trinity processors ever could, and I'm so disappointed that something like that will never be official. As a bit of a tangent, also kind of regarding A, I think a fun way to go about the fact that Ontos is capable of changing appearance and presentation entirely in between incarnations, and almost certainly had done so prior to Alvis existing, because the High Antia had a line of seers. I doubt it was all just the Alvis body the entire time. A probably isn't even the first time Ontos looked exactly like that. If Ontos is going to keep showing up again, as awesome as A is, they don't have to be A the entire time. Why don't we just notice the fact that Xenoblade is dubbed by British people and turn Ontos into the Doctor? Different appearance following the same design aesthetic each time, different voice actor, subtly different personality and role in the story. None of the other characters who knew Alvis or A or some combination of the two would question it, because they know the character is capable of doing that. I don't know. Seems like kind of a no-brainer and a fun way to explore a character that is just completely changed in appearance dozens of times throughout their life, and I don't know, British people exist. That being said, assuming this isn't another editing fail on Kadokawa's part, this actually makes something very interesting in the world of theory crafting. My initial interpretation of Ontos being split into A and Alpha was that A is Ontos in its entirety, while Alpha is more so a shell influenced by Clous stuff and Shulk's Last Wish, and that the reason for the design change was to contrast with Alpha by being significantly more feminine in appearance to make it obvious, okay, this is the good one and this is the bad one, and also simply because the whole Alpha having two wings and then keeping one after being split and A getting the other one is very thematically relevant when it comes to the animus and anima concepts that go into Ouroboros, as well as being a massive Xenogears homage. Thinking about how I was going to discuss this little sentence in this video, though, led me down a completely different interpretation of things. Remember the way Rex describes Ontos' gender. It isn't neither male nor female, it is somewhere in between male and female, which means Ontos isn't removed from the concept of gender entirely, but has specific masculine and feminine parts. And if true Ouroboros awakening comes from a male character and a female character interlinking, and Gondor used Ouroboros' power to split Ontos into a masculine and a feminine half, what if it is actually that? The masculine part of Ontos went into Alpha, and the feminine part of Ontos kept all the memories Alvis made from Xenoblade 1 and went into A. Put a pin in that. We're going to get back into that later when we're talking about Xenosaga spoilers. Next blue bullet point. A caption credited to an unnamed Monolith Soft employee. This is another frustration I have with Monolith on the art book. Basically, only Saito, Choco, and Paulo, who designed Ino and Alpha's final form, actually have their names credited. None of Monolith Soft's in-house artists' names are credited, so while you can read the credits of the game and see the names of the people who worked on it, it would be nice to know who designed each character credited to Monolith Soft and who had this commentary. Anyway, though, this caption is next to the concept art of the radio from Future Redeemed. Part of it, the relevant part to all this discussion, is, in addition, the design for the radio uses a certain something for its motif. If you zoom in, you can in fact see the Vector Industries logo on the concept art for the radio. However, it is just low res enough where you can't actually make out the word Vector on it, so this might just be how they got around the Xenosaga copyright, which is extremely funny. While they're also a bit too blurry to tell exactly, it does look like the first number on the radio's dial is 98 and the last one is 22, so it seems like even in the concept art stage, it was a very intentional point to make every single number on the radio equivalent to the year each mainline Xeno game released. Next up, Takahashi has some words about contextualizing the trilogy that Lugo Banda missed on his initial read. This is what he has to say. Xenoblade 3. It's what has continued in the Xenoblade series from 1 to 2 and then to 3. The story of Xenoblade, in parentheses 1, 2, 3, so he's again excluding X explicitly from this trilogy, is, at the end of the day, really a story about a man named Klaus who became the catalyst. The idea of Klaus becoming the catalyst for the entire story is obviously what we've seen play out on screen over the past 14 years, but also is very similar to the concept of the contact from Xenogears, which is very neat. Carrying on, that was one story that had always been there, and so in that sense, the end of that can be said to be a culmination. However, how do I say this? During the creation of games, I'm personally already thinking about what comes next, so it's more of a passing point, not a culmination. When you phrase it as a culmination, it gives an impression of giving it your all, etc., but in that sense it's slightly different, because I've personally already moved on to the next step. Looking at it from a different vantage point, considering the know-how that Monolith Soft has gained, the growth of each individual person, and including how the games, are being created, and how we worked hard on it, I suppose in that sense it is a culmination. So yeah, this is basically Takahashi going out and stating what I had assumed he was implying by 3 being a culmination, as soon as we got hints about what was coming next. 3 is the end of Klaus's story, and at the end of Future Redeemed we saw that the experiment was explicitly undone, and while 3 was also a thematic and in some ways gameplay culmination, it is not the ending of the series, It is just an ending of part of the series. Despite being the one who coined the term, I kind of grew apprehensive about calling things the Clous Saga, because it seems like it's more unnecessary spoilers than the Experiment Saga or something along that line. But seeing as how Takahashi here centers it specifically on Clous and his actions and their consequences as opposed to the experiment itself, makes me think that I was right the whole time and Clous Saga is an appropriate thing to call it. Next bullet point, following up on the last one. After the above quote, he goes on to say the original idea was for there to be an entire town on each of the Pharaonises, but this was changed out of consideration for time, budget, and manpower. As insane as Takahashi gets sometimes, it is good to know that he is actually learning how to keep his ambition in check. Obviously, that happened with Xenoblade 1, and that's how we got a Xenoblade series in the first place. But it goes to show that, yeah, the know-how Monolith Soft has gained, the growth of individual people, and how the games are being created, that is also improving in addition to the style of game design and innovation and stuff like that. They're intentionally not going out of their way to go all out. They are holding back on what they could try to do because they know it probably wouldn't work as well than what they actually chose to go with, even if it's diminished from the original vision. This is why concept art always looks cooler than the final game. It is very difficult on hardware, especially console, to make things look like they do in a very creative artist's imagination. This is even something I talked about in the original art book video. There is a lot of concept art of Pharaonises being bigger or having bigger settlements around them, and I brought this up as a possibility, so it's really neat to know that, yeah, that was the exact thought process. In universe, they're probably bigger and have entire towns and stuff like that, but this was a necessary concession to have it working on the Switch. Last bullet point from this is going back into the section about different people being different objects in Ionios. This is something I talked about in the last video, but it's good to have an actual translation this time. I'm going to read the entire previous quote because this follows from that. Ko Kojima, one of the game's directors, asks Takahashi, Noah threw Lucky 7 into the ocean at the end of the game. Was that okay? Takahashi responds as follows. This conversation, how do I put this? It deals with the fundamental aspect of Origin. Origin in Ionios. You can think of it broadly as a virtual world. Think of it like a server in a virtual world. It actually isn't that, but this will be fine for demonstration purposes. And within that, there's source code that's running. And as a way to express that, it can take the form of a sword, but also not. And Alvis was responsible for the general management of Origin systems. As the administrator, Alvis was quietly watching for a while, after Origin started up. As this was happening, Zed, a partial administrator and collective conscious-like entity, starts doing things on its own. The story of Future Redeemed starts when Alvis deems this unacceptable. Many things happen after that, but Alvis, note who he's talking about is specifically not named, but I assume Alvis, or specifically A, ends up siding with Shulk & Company, so there was no longer a general admin. And so Zed replaced that position, and that's why Zed can mess with the source code, making the human lifespan 10 years and observing it because it's amusing and things like that, although the whole 10-year lifespan thing was a change made to the code prior to Future Redeemed. Basically, you could do a lot of things. He can be brazen about it. When thinking about what can be done to break that source code, this is where you use external powers. I believe this was stated in the story, but a kind of power that exists outside the flow will be necessary. In regards to what that would be, it can be the power of the will of young people living in the world, and regardless of Numa or Logos, it's the same kind of entity as Alvis, and thus an external factor from Zed's point of view. Therefore, combining these powers and retaking the world for ourselves, that would be the broad explanation of Origin-related things. And the new bullet point, since there's great interest in it, I will also translate what follows the quote above. You had to collect Origin shards at the end of the main story, right? There's nothing concretely decided in terms of who is what shard, but you never know. Maybe those shards could be Ryan. In broad strokes, if you think about it in this way, it shouldn't be wrong. Basically, most of the other important party members from Xenoblade 1 and 2 are probably housed within Origin Metal shards that do provide use to the main party at some point during the story. And yeah, I don't really have much else to say about that. I mean, maybe the Ouroboros stones also use Origin shards that are tied to specific characters, and that could be a whole nother thing. And I don't know, maybe there's Origin Metal in the Cloud Keep, and that's what happened to Dromark. Is the Dromark head in the Cloud Keep the actual Dromark? I don't know. Not really much else to say about this one. In addition to Lugal Banda, Nintendo Everything has also been translating snippets of the art book interview, and they did cover one passage that Lugal Banda did not, so that will also be linked in the description, and I'm going to talk about this here, because it's talking about character expressions. I don't know from what part of this interview it is, I don't know who's talking here, but this is what they have to say. When we say we value expressions, we've always considered them to be important, and would like to treat them even more importantly in the future. That is to say, we touched upon video game grammar earlier, but there are scenes with mundane conversations, right? If it was a 3-minute conversation, one would get fed up with it if it was written in video game grammar. You might mash the button hoping you'd get to progress. However, when watching a live-action movie, even if a scene is about 5 minutes long, as long as the actor's performances and chemistry work, even if there is no music or special effects, one would end up watching it all the same. The difference there might be the choice of words, or the power of the lines, but the most important part is the expressions. A lot of actors can speak using their eyes alone, and those things can fill a gap and prevent people from getting bored in live-action media. But for games, we can't reach that level of expressiveness yet. That's why we want to focus on this more in the future. As an extreme example, if we were to make a 10-minute long scene, we'd want to make something that can just stand on the verbal exchanges without music or effects, and that's the goal we were trying to aim for. This is just an example though, of course. We aren't trying to make an actual 10-minute scene, so don't misunderstand. Bullshit, you have done this before in every Xeno game. Getting back on topic, but when just looking at the cutscenes for a game, many have plenty of action scenes and flashy scenes, and there are many titles that I think would make for great reference material for future generations. But when it comes to people and people's exchange of words and emotions, there's a tendency toward their actions, while the showcasing of the silent parts are still mostly stuck in the realm of video game grammar. So I would like it if Monolith Soft could reach that first. It makes a lot of sense that this kind of focus on character acting in terms of animation in addition to voice performance is an important goal of Monolith, especially in a game like Xenoblade 3 that has a more somber and subdued tone for a lot of it. It seems like this has been a priority of theirs for almost a decade. The original release of Xenoblade 1 obviously has some issues with being expressive because it's a Wii game, and Xenoblade X's character models are often criticized for looking plasticky and uncanny, but starting with Xenoblade 2, they made the character designs very different from past games, intentionally so it could be more expressive. And then Definitive Edition, they reanimated all of the characters' faces throughout the entirety of Xenoblade 1, because they now had the technology to make them more expressive looking. And then Xenoblade 3 follows up on what both of those games did, being a culmination of 1 and 2 in yet another aspect, and also places a lot more emphasis on characters' eyes. That's something I always see praised about the animation in the game. So it's good to know that this is something they've been working towards the entire time. This is a culmination of years of training in the most literal of sense, and they're getting a lot of praise for something that they put a lot of emphasis in work into. So that's great. It's even greater to know that we've got a lot of good things to look forward to because they're clearly not fully satisfied with what they've done already. Alright, we are getting into the theory portion of the program. But first, I would like to mention one specific thing. I said that Malos represents the sun in the Trinity process. That is true. I also said that Malos, potentially coming back in a future Xenoblade game, would be a reference to the resurrection of Jesus, because Malos is technically the Jesus stand-in in Xenoblade 2. Now, that is only one possibility, obviously, and I knew that when I said that. I focused on that one because it was close to Easter, and I wanted to make a joke about it. The other distinct possibility is that Malos seemingly dying in the Aegis War during Torna, then coming back for the main game, was instead the reference to the resurrection. And then he died at the end of Xenoblade 2 again. Then, his potential return after Ionios would instead be a reference to the second coming of Jesus. Seeing how the second coming tends to be tied into the final judgment of humanity and the end of days, I think we can bring in the Xenosaga spoilers because there's a lot to talk about here. First off, if the return of Malos equals second coming is true, that means something apocalyptic is likely coming around for the world yet again, and well, yeah, we know that's happening. Because Xenosaga is being tied in now. An entire plot point in Xenosaga 3 was that stopping Wilhelm's plans would mean the world would eventually undergo heat death. And the entire thing the characters are doing after the end of the game is trying to find a way to stop that. So yeah, all the apocalyptic stuff in the Xenoblade games only really had to do with the pocket dimensions. Either the world of Xenoblade 1, Alrest, or Ionios, but now that they're combined back into Lost Jerusalem and reintegrated with the rest of the universe, there's potential universal scale destruction coming in the future. Granted, That will be for a few tens of thousands of years based on dialogue in episode 3, but when compared to the age of the entire universe, that's not a whole lot of time to try and find a way to fix things. Chaos, the most knowledgeable character left in the series by the end of episode 3, says that the key to fixing everything lies on Lost Jerusalem, on Earth. He, in some disembodied sense, and Cosmos' heavily damaged body, are floating in space very near to Earth. And a subset of the main cast, including Xion, is flying out towards it at the end of episode 3. A very important thing Chaos says before all this goes down is that the key to saving the universe lies on Earth, on Lost Jerusalem, a planet he refers to as the Land of Origin. It's also important to note that the Zohar and all of the Gnosis in the universe, they're basically the same thing as Mobius/Fogbeast, so that's kind of important probably, were brought to Lost Jerusalem when Cosmos and Chaos did their thing. That means that currently on Earth we have the casts of Xenoblade 1 and 2, Cosmos' body, which can easily be repaired by characters like Shulk and Tora, Chaos in some way, and probably the Xenosaga version of the Zohar. So there is effectively one of those back even though the conduit's gone. On the way there are several Xenosaga characters, including Xion, whose lineage has a very specific tie to the Zohar, and it's likely that she or a descendant of hers will need to make it there in order for important things to happen. Also, Junior will be coming, and with the exception of maybe Chaos, I think he might be the most powerful character on the Xenosaga side left, because they don't have access to the Zohar anymore, and Cosmos will need to be rebuilt, so that might also mean something. I am not sure if anyone writing Xenosaga 3 actually knew what Chaos meant by the key to saving the universe when they did that. Maybe it was a bullet point in the drafts for later elements of the series that didn't come to be, or maybe the direction they had to take Xenosaga once it needed to be compressed to 3 games and then had to lose a lot of the intended content for those 3 games meant that that direction couldn't be carried out. But I believe that they are retconning Xenosaga, not even really retconning because they never explained it in the first place. They are retroactively deciding that that key is the completed Trinity processor, because with that, the Zohar and Xion, a descendant from the people of the Zohar who have higher communication abilities with it, it's probably capable of doing something when all combined. Considering the conduit is probably Xenosaga's Zohar that got split off into 2 once All Rest became a separate universe from the rest of it, was able to send people into different universes, I'm betting Xion with a full Trinity processor is also capable of doing that, meaning a way for humanity to escape the collapse of the Xenosaga universe could be traveling to a different one. Perhaps taking ships that look like Abel's Ark to the beginning of space-time in a different universe. A process they could repeat ad infinitum so a universe they're in never dies. And eventually they find one that will have its own humanity in planet Earth, becoming known as people called the Samarians. I don't know. It's a possibility. Anyway, though, the issue arises in the fact that we might not actually have the complete Trinity processor right now. Numa, we're almost certainly fine. While Glimmer's core crystal is vestigial, both Pyra and Mithra are there. No big deal. Malos is still around in Ionios, meaning there's got to be a way to pull him back into existence, so we have Logos again. What about Ontos? What exactly happened when Alpha died? Because Alpha and A split off from the same being. Did A reabsorb Alpha? Is A actually the complete Ontos anymore? It's like I was saying before. It's time to grab that pin back. If A is specifically the feminine part of Ontos, plus Alvis's memories and personality, and Alpha is the masculine part of Ontos, plus Clous and Shulk's wish influence, did A reabsorb the masculine part of Ontos and become the complete Ontos again, or did Alpha just completely fade out of existence, and we've now only got a partial Ontos that can't form the entire Trinity even if Malos is brought back and Pyra and Mithra are holding hands and channeling their power together or something? Where are we supposed to get the male half of an Ontos from? Well, you know how I said Cosmos isn't the only Xenosaga character who's in close proximity to Earth at the end when we see Cosmos being a blue meteor, aka right after the ending of Ionios? Chaos is there as well. Not only was Chaos's design the basis for Alvis and Elma's designs, but he is also the embodiment of the power of anima, basically one half of a failsafe for the universe, and he is specifically the male-aligned part as contrasted with the power of animus, which is female-aligned. So yeah, if we have an Ontos who potentially can't use the Ontos power because they are missing the male part of the Ontos processor, and then crashing down on Earth, we've got a blue-haired robot girl who's going to get repaired by Shulk and I'm going to say hopefully Riku, not Tora, actually, now that I think about it, as well as the disembodied voice of the original mysterious white-haired twink in the series, both shouting about how you should try and find and then fire up the Trinity processor because our buddy Shion's coming soon, and if she's not able to use it, we're all going to die. And then A's like, yo, I can't Ontos right now. And then Chaos is like, wait a minute, you're the female part of Ontos, I'm the male part of the universe's failsafe mechanism. What if we just combine and we don't have to run into the issue of Alvis and Chaos looking almost identical because they'll be the same character, and then that reforms the complete Ontos. They revive Malos somehow, and then you already got Numa, there's your entire Trinity processor, boom, Shion or her descendant lands, hey, there we go, she can now interface with the Zohar and the Trinity processor to either fix the universe or have everyone jump through a Rick and Morty portal with Xenoblade X on the other side, and that's how that stuff happens. I'm legitimately not even reaching anymore. This is a reasonable extrapolation from what the games have directly told us. You will see in 5 years. Until next time, though, which will be next week and not 5 years from now, this is Luxon, signing off.